Be seated, please. How's your toe?
Alhamdulillah. It's not improving, but Alhamdulillah anyway.
It is stationary.
Yes.
Did you have a single dose of silicia?
Yes, sir.
As suggested?
Yes, sir.
It works within 2-3 days, not immediately.
Yes, sir.
But you didn't suffer from any pain either anyway. So how do you know that it's not improving?
By
there was no pain.
Its shape only.
Pardon?
By its shape, and the pain still exists.
But yesterday you told me that you were not suffering from any pain anymore.
Only when I saw you, Hazur.
Now I know. Because that is what misled me to that medicine. If there were pain, if I knew there was pain, then I should have suggested Hapaself instead. So that made me decide in favor of this, while it was quite a different reason why you were not suffering from pain.
Well, you see, the love that I feel for you, Hazur, is more than the pain.
You remind me of a verse of Ghalib.
Yes,
which,
sir.
Have you ever heard of that? It's quite a
maybe.
famous couplet in Urdu. Even those who do not know much of his poetry, at least remember this much, because it often comes in handy. It says, उनके देखे से जो आ जाती है मुँह पर रौनक, वो समझते हैं कि बीमार का हाल अच्छा है. Whenever he comes, the signs of happiness and health, they watch on my face, they observe on my face. They think the patient is much better than before. Now I said they, but in fact it means he or she, whatever it is. In English Urdu style of poetry, they mention in obscure terms,
Yes, sir.
so that nobody can pinpoint who it is. Right?
Yes, sir.
So let's start with the brass tacks, please. So the business itself.
So today we have got Brother Mustafa Sabir Sahib,
Yes.
Mr. Dar, and two friends of Brother
course.
Kaleem.
Mhm.
So I think
This
he
is
will.
Pavel Pinkover. He's a doctor of solid state physics, but is now
MashaAllah, really?
Yes, but he's now working as a futures and options broker, just like I am. So we've both been corrupted. This is Russell Pine. He's the prospective Liberal Democrat candidate for Putney, and he's also
Putney?
a barrister.
That's right. Yeah.
Is that right? Yes. Most
right.
welcome, all of you. Now, shall we begin
Yes,
with
Mustafa.
Mustafa? Are you kept busy in preparing Liqa Mal Arab program?
Inshallah, when I go to Canada, I will be busy doing that.
No, but I told them to keep you busy here as well, to have many of your interviews and this and that. So whenever I am not here during that program, we could put in your videos,
Inshallah, Hazur.
right?
Inshallah.
Shall we hear from you now, please? What's your
Yes,
problem?
Hazur, there is a question in Christianity. The concept of salvation is attained through grace, not through works. And in Islam, the Holy Prophet ﷺ was asked whether your works will entitle you to enter paradise, or you will enter paradise through the grace of Allah. And he said, no, through the grace of Allah. Does it mean that the concept of Christianity is also applicable in Islam?
You see, this question has to be sorted out first and further analyzed before I begin to answer this question. I think the presentation of Christian idea is not very faithful, very exactly true. The Christian idea of faith and grace and good deeds is exactly, in my understanding, is exactly the same as this idea, three-cornered idea, is expressed in every religion as the basic and fundamental for forgiveness. Now there are some distortions, of course, here and there, but they are made by the people of the latest ages and those who interpret wrongly. But Christianity as itself is not to be differentiated from either Islam or Judaism or any other faith. What you refer to perhaps is St. Paul's emphasis on the grace, in the sense that we are all born sinful and it is impossible for us to be forgiven while we are sinful, because forgiveness in this context would mean reunion with our Lord, who is all pure. So Pauline philosophy builds this theme further by pointing out that purity and impurity cannot go together. So return of our souls to God requires a purification to a degree where no blemish of the sin is left. Now that is one proposition. On the other side, the dilemma begins when he, according to his understanding of Old Testament, infers from the sin of Adam and Eve that sin went into the progenies of Adam's offsprings, a progeny of Adam till the end of the time. All children born of Eve and Adam inherited sin, and because of that, no man can be entitled to return to God as completely in a fit state to merge back with Him. The second problem is that of adl, that is justice. He believes that because the dictates of justice would not permit God to shut His eyes, whatever eyes can refer in that meaning, can mean in reference with reference to God. God cannot shut His eyes to the sins, and they must be equated with some sort of punishment or compensation or whatever you call it. How can you go about it? Every man is a born sinner, and he must be somehow forgiven and cleansed of his sins, or cleansed. Cleansed is the pronunciation. Cleansed of his sins. And God cannot forgive, because against the dictates of justice. So the most subtle scheme which struck the mind of God, not in these words, but this is the substance of Pauline philosophy, was that why shouldn't He make His own Son suffer for the sake of all the sinners of the world? And in this case, the dictates of justice will also be fulfilled, and forgiveness will be granted because already somebody had suffered. And thus the man as a whole, whoever believes in Jesus Christ, will be cleansed of his marked, his birthmark of sin. Now, in this respect, the question of deeds and good deeds does not show up its face. It is here that the confusion begins. According to Pauline philosophy, such people should be forgiven. But he was a very intelligent person, as well as rather extremely involved in his thinking. But he knew that he was answerable in many areas of his philosophy, and that these areas must be fully attended. So he conceived an other philosophical concept whereby he bypassed the problem which is created by this philosophy. He said, what is sin? Born sinners we are, all right. But what is sin? Sin is born out of Sharia, the law of God. And sin is flesh. So, how can you wipe out sin without doing away with the the flesh and everything. So he said this is how Jesus did it. He abolished all law, because sin is the defiance of the will of God. So if law is abolished, then there is no will of God to be violated. So as such, there is no problem. Now, when you go about this in that way, then there is no need for Jesus to carry the sins of others anyway. Abolish the law and there will be no sin. And a sinless society which is not answerable to any law is already forgiven. So, with this understanding of Pauline Christianity, one should divide the age into two parts. One, those who were before Jesus Christ, when law was not abolished, and those who were after Jesus Christ, when the law was abolished. So when the law is abolished, there is no need for any sacrifice from the part of Jesus either. When the law was not abolished, there was no Jesus to sacrifice himself for their sake, because faith in Jesus is also a precondition for forgiveness. Why should Jesus suffer for your sake? At least you should do something for him, and that is to have faith in him. Now, when understood in this whole totality, then it becomes a very involved rigmarole of philosophy without much substance in it. Now one must analyze why St. Paul had to go through all this intricate system of reaching forgiveness. First of all, he failed to understand that if God sacrificed an innocent person, as innocent he himself was, then was it not against the dictates of justice? It was very much so. So there is an inherent contradiction within the philosophy of St. Paul regarding forgiveness. And acts do not come into picture. Righteous acts do not come into picture at all because of this. Sin is done away with, so there is no need for righteousness. So this again was a dilemma which was faced by St. Paul, and it had to be answered because human nature would rebel against such a concept that you live free to do whatever you like. Now, freedom to do something also involves many problems of misbehavior on the part of those who are liberated. So that again has to be brought to the focus of intention, how the abolition of law begins or ushers in a new era where no man will be able to commit sin because there is no law. Does that mean that his propensity to commit crimes, now I am not talking of sin, I am talking of crimes, his propensity to commit crimes will also be washed out, or will it continue? Now, what we have observed already is that the propensity to commit crimes, to ill-treat other fellow human beings, to misappropriate your brothers and sisters and daughters and others of their fundamental rights, this continues. Continues not only among the non-Christians but also among the Christians. And there is an upward trend in crime. So does the abolition of law mean that you can do whatever you like, have faith, and that's all you have to, the price you have to pay for your deliverance? Now, human nature will not accept such a concept at all. This is in fact an affront to the concept of human behavior and decency. Basically, man must seek guidance from God to acquire a better and more civilized behavior and decency, so that at least other fellow human beings of a person do not suffer at his hands. So this formula of deliverance has no answer for this. Moreover, as I suggested, the acts are not mentioned, but what did St. Paul do to fill this blank? This is what I'm coming to. So that's why I said actions still have a role to play even in this philosophy. Because as I suggested, he's a very intelligent man. I have read him very critically and minutely, and he does involve himself in contradictions, but willful contradictions. Internal contradictions which are an attempt, conscious attempt to avoid criticism from one side until he offers himself to be criticized from the other. You see, he covers himself on one side very cleverly, while the other is left open as if there is one shield only. Either you are saving your right side or your left side, but can't save both of them together. So here he has come out with a beautiful formula, because it's really beautiful, that you live in Christ. That is to say, Christ as a holy man, when you have faith in him, you become holy. And there is no need for law. But that is law. To live like Christ is the strictest form of law that you could imagine. Because this means the model of prophets, as we can conceive in case of other religions, the model of the prophets is to be followed to every letter and in spirit as well, to letter and spirit. That is faith. If that is faith, all the law is there, because Jesus lived a pious life. He is never known to have broken any law of the Old Testament, although according to St. Paul he was above that, yet he never broke it. So if the faith means to live in Christ, then all the law has come back. That pious model is to be followed and imitated to all its minutest detail. And how many are there who could do that? And if they are to be delivered only, if faith means this, then what is the difference between belief in other prophets and belief in Jesus Christ? None is left, because belief in other prophet also means to follow their model. If you do not follow their model, your belief in them, your faith in them is defective to that degree. And as such, you do not earn deliverance. Then comes grace. So this is the ultimate relationship between grace and acts, and why grace is needed. So if this is the Christian philosophy, that if you live in Jesus Christ, this is the meaning of faith, then automatically you are rid of crimes and also sins. Crimes in relation to the social values, sin in relation to offending God's will and purpose of creation. So in this respect, because nobody can live up to the high noble model created as a paragon of virtue, whether you call it a prophet or Messiah, so everybody is deficient. There the grace comes in, and grace is over and above justice. So the very first starting point of Pauline philosophy is negated again. If grace has to play a role, then it stands above justice. When justice is not sufficient, then comes in grace. So this is the meaning of Hazrat Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's observation, that none would be forgiven by God if purely judged on the principle of justice. It is grace which is needed. Now when we look up to the prophets, you expect, you do not know their limitations, but they look to be, as I have just appeared to you from your vantage point looking up, as perfect models. But when they look within themselves, then they find faults everywhere. They think they should have followed God and His instruction much better than what they could. Their wish to please God always, extends beyond their capacity to please God. So when you look at them from their vantage point, they find fault in everything they do. This is the meaning of Psalms Psalms of David here.
Yes.
In the Psalms of David and Ghazalul Ghazlat of Solomon.
Yes.
Uska kya English? What is it?
Songs of Solomon.
Songs of Solomon hai? Or something else? Songs of Solomon. In Psalms of David, you read him describing himself as a man who is rotten through and through, so ugly, so miserable, that he is ashamed to call himself a man. Now, this is the confession of one of the greatest prophets according to Islam and the greatest models of virtue according to the people of the book. If not prophet, at least man of who is, according to the Bible, was highly loved and endeared by God. But this is what he says about himself. This can only be understood in relative terms. And every man, which whatever status he belongs to, cannot behave as perfectly as he would desire to behave. So the desire always transcends his capability to please God with his actions. This is a human limitation. So in this respect, when the Holy Prophet of Islam was inquired, even you will not be forgiven on the basis of your actions, he said, no, not even me. I depend on grace of Allah. So the grace is from God according to Christianity as well. The grace comes from God the Father, not from Son, whatever concept of the Son they hold. So when he is graceful, without his grace, nothing can be done. Why should he violate the principle of justice himself by suffering, by making an innocent part of himself suffer? And suffer to what extent? If all the humanity during the second return of Jesus Christ, as they believe, the second advent, becomes truly Christian and follow him, then, even then, disposition towards crime will not finish. It's a very childish and naive idea if anybody entertains that what his previous visit could not do, his second visit would do. You see? And the previous visit should have done it because he called towards suffering, sacrifices, labor, and continuous perseverant offering of life, honor, and all that you hold dear for the sake of a noble idea. This is the history of first 300 years of Christianity. If they did not cleanse man of his propensity to commit crimes, how could the second visit would be just be, a glorious visit where everybody would see the signs and believe, achieve the same purpose? Reformation always is directly related to the suffering which every person requires before he is reformed. Take the case of a drug addict. How can he suddenly be reformed in believing something? Even if he does, he has to go through a course of suffering to gradually wean from the addiction of drugs. And these, what are they called, the symptoms, you know?
Cold turkey it's called when you take off the drugs.
Those symptoms which appear after you are distancing yourself from a habit, they are suffering. And it is that suffering, your own suffering, which reforms you, not somebody else's suffering.
Right.
Right?
Good example.
Thank you. So in this, overview of the whole things, the interrelationship of religion, you find that every religion is based on the same principles. There is no difference at all whatsoever, and should not be any difference at all. Thank you. Dar Sahib.
As you know, one of the very important responsibility which the Jamaat elders have is the tarbiyat of our younger generation, because they are the nation of tomorrow.
Yes.
And this question relates to our teenagers. I know the answer, but I think my
Why do you ask them?
but my answer may be a sort of crude one and non-convincing. Therefore, I have to come before you to ask this question. I know it is being asked by some of our teenagers.
It is not a question of teenagers at all. It's a question of our responsibility to the future. Why call teenager, grown-up, small children? And the tarbiyat, as you said, means upbringing and teaching and education. It begins from the cradle. So when you speak of teenagers, it is implied that you have been negligent to the teenagers before they reach the teenage. And it's too late for you to start there. This is what I have been emphasizing throughout my sermons. Take care of your children right from the moment they are born. And the reformation of the future generation is a far cry. You should first attend to your own reformation. If the present generation is not reformed, how can it even boast of attempting to reform the future generations? So I have spoken on this many times for hours and upon hours during my sermons. So either you miss the points, or I fail to convey. I think I take the responsibility.
I just want to put that question which...
I just answered the question.
No.
In short, this is what I could do. Do you want me to repeat all the sermons on
No,
this?
sir. The
If
question
I
which
do,
is-
then their coming here would be just purposeless. They have also to participate in the question, please. Right?
I'd like to pass it
Oh, yes.
over straight away.
Yes.
Hi. Yes, sir. I mean, I look around. I'm 31 years old, so I'm no longer a teenager. But ever since I was,
But you look younger than 31, I must
thank
say.
you. Thank you.
I should have put you at 27 to 28.
Oh well, I'll take that as a
This is a compliment
Yeah,
to you.
thank you.
Yes?
And all my life I've looked around and I see lots of people of different faiths and saying different things. And obviously, you've already told us today about the basic similarities, but you say that, and a lot of people don't seem to see the similarities. I have a question which is very straightforward. How do I tell the truth when I hear it?
How do you?
Tell what is true when I hear it, because sometimes I'm confused.
Right, yes. You see, this question can be answered in different ways. But first of all, I would draw your attention to the introspective method. Everyone is created with truth, according to the claim of the Holy Quran, as well as I understand, the same claim is shared by every other religion. Barring the opinion of St. Paul, that every boy is born sinful, and if you go to Old Testament and study it in depth, you will find that this is not right. According to the Old Testament as well, and according to the teachings of Jesus as well, nobody would bear the cross of the other. So none should be born sinful, otherwise he'll be bearing the cross of his forefathers. So that is, let me clarify it first. So everyone is born with truth. Every child is innocent. And as such, later on, his upbringing makes different things out of him. That is why the responsibility of the older generation, as he mentioned, I answered to him, it begins with your own responsibility within yourself. But coming to your question, that means that we have been born with an inbuilt criterion, or not criterion but touchstone of truth, which may be soiled, may be dusted, but it's always there for us to reach and find the answers. So if anyone keeps his inborn truth intact, the question you have raised would be easily answered with reference to your inner self, what you believe should be right and what you believe should be wrong. And when I say that, I mean universally what man believes should be right and man believes should be wrong. That is basic truth. For instance, when you tell lies in any country of the world, even in communist countries, everyone knows lies are bad. When you usurp other people's rights, whether the law exists or not, whether it's abolished or not abolished, the committer of sin knows himself that this is wrong. So there is an inbuilt law which cannot be done away with. And the law from on high, given to man from on high, that is from God, must perfectly coincide with the law within. Now, whether the outer truth is right or wrong, first of all, can be judged with reference to your inner law. Born. If a teachings, for instance, a teaching is on to be examined and judged. Now, delve deeper into your own self, contemplate and think. Is it really universal? Can it apply to all people together? Does it not violate any sense of justice with which I am born? If you apply the truth to be examined to this inner inbuilt phenomenon of judging right from the wrong, the answer should always be right. In the English idiom, to be able to call a spade is an oversimplified statement of the same thing which I am just discussing. Every man who has this quality, to call a spade, is fortunate to have preserved his inner truth. But very few people are there in the world who can call a spade. This is the problem. An oversimplified statement, but extremely difficult when it comes to application in everyday human experiences. So, be true to your own truth, and the judgment of the outer truth would become an easy thing. If man is distorted within, then it's impossible for him to be able to judge whatever he hears, whatever he sees. So this is the first condition laid by the Holy Quran for making someone entitled to be guided by the Quran. It's an amazing statement right in the beginning of Surah Baqarah. The first chapter is called Surah Fatiha. This is only of 7 verses. But for all practical purposes, Surah Fatiha is not the first chapter because it is a gist of what is to come. The whole Quran.
Introduction.
It's like, the first chapter in reality after this is Surah Al-Baqarah, which says, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This is that book which was promised. There is no doubt whatsoever in it. No doubt in the claim that this is the book which had been promised earlier by two prophets. No doubt in it itself. Yet, hudal lil muttaqeen, it will guide only those who are righteous within. So you seek guidance for the sake of righteousness. But here is a precondition laid which seems to be an inherent contradiction. You want to be righteous, that is why you seek guidance. And the first declaration is, you have to be righteous before you begin to seek guidance.
A chicken and egg.
Wow.
But it is not. Because here the righteousness means the simplest meaning of truth, not the advanced qualities of truth. Because righteousness begins with the very simple elementary concept of truth to a higher and more complex stage where there is no end to it, in fact. Righteousness will always remain relative in relation to the more perfect or the perfect models which we call as which we entitle as prophets or messengers of Allah. But from Allah's vantage point, that also would be imperfection. But from our vantage point, you can so many grades, impossible to count, between the man who is beginning the journey to truth to the man who is much advanced. And herein the inner truth, it can exactly be defined in the English idiom to be able to call a spade a spade. When that you have reached that integrity, that honesty, which sometimes is possessed by simple, poor, ordinary villagers far more than poor citizens of great cities. Poor both are poor, but one is simple and poor, the other is crooked and poor. So that is why the truth is far more accessible to those who belong to this category of simplicity and honesty, whereby they can see a thing which appeals to them and they say, yes, okay, we like it, we accept it. So these are the two ways. Or is it just one way I mentioned? Now, one was that you can put all observations to the criterion of your inbuilt concept of truth. Secondly, when something comes from outside as truth, you will be able to be led rightly if you have developed this quality of seeing something and saying, yes, I see this as this, and accepting it. If you come across teachings which you say, yes, very good, fine teachings, and then you go your own way and continue to follow your own old practices, then this is not truth. This observation is false, that it is truth. Because when you say to call a spade, it requires more things than it seems on the surface. When you call a spade, you can't hit your child with a spade, with the wrong end in his direction, because the spade would cut his throat or injure his belly seriously or whatever it is. So to call a spade means to really believe in what you see. And when you believe in what you see, then you always use it for the purpose it is built. And you cannot mistreat that thing. Because when you know it is a snake, then you can't poke your finger into his mouth. And similarly, the whole life can be explained in this regard, that truth is a very powerful thing. truth is only truth when it has the quality of shaping your life and subjecting yourself to what you believe. So in this way, the judgment of truth is not difficult, but this way is difficult. To be able to reach that stage is difficult because you have to continuously purify yourself and prepare yourself. You prepare yourself to offer sacrifices for things which you think are good for you or for mankind. And that is why the people of the prophets, at the time of the prophets, they go through this mill of persecution and suffer it bravely with heads held high, because they know this is truth, not the others.
Yeah.
Right? Thank you. Please.
Yes, Azhar, I'd like to ask you, if I may, a general question and
Anything,
a specific
anything.
question.
Most welcome.
Thank you. One subject that I know concerns many citizens of Britain, particularly a few years ago, but still today, is the response of the Muslim community to the author Salman Rushdie's book, The Satanic Verses, and of course the fatwa that was issued against him. What I want to know in specific terms is, do you support the fatwa that was issued against Salman Rushdie? And in general terms, if you do, to what extent do you think that violence or the threat of violence is justified against those who offend against
but I think
your
this
religion?
question is only directed in one direction, while the other direction should also be contained in this question, as to the reaction of those who support Salman Rushdie's behavior and conduct, and who praise his work as an excellent piece of art, praiseworthy piece of art. So open this question and widen it. Otherwise it will be not fair for me to only answer you in one direction while the other direction is left unattended. This question has to be taken in totality. That's what I mean. The issue of fatwa of others does not apply to me, because I'm the head of the Ahmadiyya community. So the question could have been better modulated if it said that what is the fatwa of Jamaat Ahmadiyya in this. You see, I am speaking from the seat where fatwas are issued, not followed, because I am understood to be the leader of Ahmadiyya community in the sense that I understand the Holy Quran and the Hadith, etc., better in most cases. In some cases I may falter, I agree, I am not above this. But in most cases of all the living people today in Ahmadiyya, if I were not the person who would understand the Quranic teachings and the Hadith better than all other individuals, then I would not be fit for this occupation. Right? So you can inquire from me, what is your fatwa? My fatwa is the one which I have repeatedly spoken of, but the British press boycotted my observations despite being present at the time when I spoke on this subject in detail and in depth. Immediately after the incident, I called a press conference which was heavily attended by the national press as well as by the local press from different parts of the country. And at the end of the conference, I told them, look here, we have spent 2 hours together, very pleasant atmosphere, everything, but today you are not going to publish anything of what I have said. Tomorrow, I mean. And some of them were genuinely amazed and some affectedly amazed. Why shouldn't we? I said, even if you should, your papers will not publish, because you want to publish only that material which your people want from you. Excitement. Any answer which defends Islam and which presents the whole issue in a perspective where Islam appears to be a lovable religion will not be acceptable to you, because the people don't want such an answer. They want an answer which helps Khomeiniism to be highlighted. So if I had said whatever Khomeini had said, you will publish the flashing headlines. The head of the Ahmadiyya community fully supports this, and every paper will cover. But because I have rejected his fatwa, and because I have explained according to with reference to the Holy Quran that no man has a right to punish anybody for any blasphemy, you are not going to publish it, and it was not published. The next day, as if no conference had taken place, because your press is becoming like a mafia. It follows unwritten, undictated policies which the press thinks suit the Western interests. If anything is published which brings Islam closer to the hearts of the Western people, then that publication would make that press as much unpopular, to that degree unpopular, because that is not what is in the air we see. Today you want Islam to be kept at distance. Now maybe largely because Islam is presented to you by extremists today, but those extremists who present Islam, they are never questioned as to the validity of their views on Islam, while this is the issue which should have to be brought to the focus of attention. Because it's a long answer, and I know all of you are extremely very intelligent people and educated, you will understand the points which are relevant and which are central to the issue. All discussions on Rushdie or other such things should focus upon the teachings of the Holy Quran and their correct interpretation. That should be debatable. Khomeini has a right to interpret the Quran and the Hadith in his own way, so have I. But it should have been publicly discussed with reference to the teachings, not with reference to the disposition of certain leaders, not with reference to the political dictates of the Muslim country, but with reference to the religious dictates of Islam itself. So that is where they have gone remiss everywhere. No questions were raised in this direction. Oh, all right, Mr. Khomeini, come on, bring your arguments based on the Holy Quran. And then any sensible person who has any knowledge of the Quran could have rebutted those arguments and stilled his voice. That was not done. On the other hand, attempts were made to further aggravate the situation of misunderstanding between the Christians and Islam and Muslims, because this issue, as I also mentioned during that press conference, if looked at from a different point, where the behavior of the European public or the Western public is concerned, or Western leadership is concerned, if you look at it from that point of view, you will be surprised to see that they are all supporting indecency. Such indecency as they will never tolerate in their own parliaments. They will call it an unparliamentary language and chuck out the people who do not swallow that insult. So openly I mentioned Mrs. Thatcher, who was the Prime Minister at that time. I said, the issues involved are not just a total freedom. Issues involved are where your freedom stops and our freedom begins. Issues are drawing a line between the spheres of freedom of people, and you yourself accept the freedom of some people not to be hurt unnecessarily. This is a common decency which is the fruit of civilization. You employ this principle in your parliaments. And I said, if somebody stands up in the parliament and calls Mrs. Thatcher a whore, you know, a wretched, wanton lady, would you tolerate it in the name of freedom? Impossible. The whole house would rise in protest against such a person. Either he swallows that insult himself or he'll be chucked out of the parliament. Now here we are speaking of a political leader of one country. What about the religious leader who is held in much higher esteem to that to which Mrs. Thatcher could ever be held? Why not people of one country? 1 billion people all over the world. And you do not show any decency towards that honor, the honor of such a man, such a leader. So if your common language and common behavior, this indecency is carried out, although there is no punishment you can mete out to such a person according to religion, at least you should distance yourself from this. At least you should condemn the indecencies contained in Salman Rushdie's book. Anybody who has read it would know that right from the beginning he is out at insulting and through aspersions on the characters of all the near ones to Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallam, his wives, his companions, in the foulest language. See, which even hurts the sensibilities of modern people in relation to the modern things. And to abuse somebody who is dead and abuse a generation who are dead, who are held in such high esteem of holiness by 1/5 of the total population of the world, and for you to praise him and to award him when you support him, what does it indicate? It's reflective of your own internal distortions. So there should have been voices raised in condemnation. If that had been done, the reaction of the Muslim world would be completely different. They would have begun to respect you. They would have started coming closer to you. And it would be they who would condemn Salman Rushdie, Khomeini. Was this nonsense? The decent people of the world have already punished this man. But this is not what happened. So the fault is on both the parties, equally or unequally shared, but the fault lies on both sides. Right?
Yes. And you think that Khomeini inflamed the situation?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. We have some time left, I think. A few minutes. Yes.
Do you have another question? Well, yeah. I mean, I see things grow and die, and things are made and they break. And when I ask myself on my inner touchstone, I can't help but think that one day mankind itself, which I'm always seeing growing, will one day itself, the universe is so large, we're so small, I sometimes despair to think that one day Shakespeare might be there, but no one to read him. You know, I worry about that. I would like to know if there is.
But I'm worried about people in whose country Shakespeare was born, who are gradually distancing themselves from reading Shakespeare.
Well, yes.
Because of the age of television. Because of the age of filth replacing nobility in providing you pleasure. Comparatively we are deteriorating in our tastes, and we are moving from decency to vulgarity in general. It is true of all the human pursuits today in any society in the world, not only the West. Imagine when music played a highly noble role of bringing peace to you, not excitement. Excitement was occasionally employed, but to deliver a noble message. But what is music today? It is excitement to grab whatever you can. The player at its basest level. You go for it and while your life away, without realizing that we cannot have access to players equally in this world. Only we can be excited to have access to such player, but in reality it is impossible for man to divide player equally and to make it accessible to every home. Even the albums of popular music today cannot be bought by every home, while on television when they come across such glimpses, they are excited even to have them. So you require crime to attain your goals of pleasure. And when the society is constantly moving in that direction, what would be left of decent values? So this is my problem which I face. This is the high time that the British people should pay attention to the root causes of crime and unrest and lack of content. No policing, no changes in the law can ever serve the purpose of bringing peace back to the country. It's impossible. What happened, the most tragic incident of a madman shooting down small innocent children. Unbelievable. Now, he was not a madman. This is wrong to say that he was a madman. Madman won't do that. It lies beyond the scope of a madman to have committed such crime. He was standing on the border between sanity and madness, but madness of crime, not other madness. That man was created by the social values and trends of the nation. Child abuse is on the increase, and no moral measures are taken to bring it to a stop or to stem the trend. That man could have been the product of this society, where he saw child abuse everywhere. Maybe he himself was a subject of that. Maybe a deep psychological sense of revenge created such a man. So no legal measures or no extra hard limitations imposed on the weapons you can possess and you cannot. This simply will not work. If you don't give licenses to people, it is the same type of people who rob others and run away with their weapons. And illicit trade of weapons is everywhere. It only makes the life difficult for the law-abiding people when you you move your legislation in the direction of more stringent laws. Who suffer? Only the same or noble people, law-abiding civilians. And the criminals always remain outside the bounds of your stringent laws and legislations. The root causes always lie in the moral degradation and the overall atmosphere which promotes moral degradation in the name of liberty. Again, the same liberty. When you support indecency in case of Salman Rushdie, how can you withhold supporting indecency in other cases? It's a general license. Freedom is freedom. Do whatever you may. On the other hand, the law continues to restrict people to more stringent ways of life. This is a contradiction in terms. On the one hand, the man is given the concept of freedom which knows no limits. You can do whatever you may. Pleasure is the object, purpose of this life. On the other hand, laws continues to fight back what it releases itself. This can't do. Do whatever you may. The society will never return to peace unless moral measures are taken to remedy the ills which have been created by man himself. Right? Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I think it's time now, isn't it? Oh, good. I take leave of you. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I hope you can come as much and as often as you can afford.
Well, they're locals.
I'd love to meet you again. And you are standing from this constituency?
This constituency, that's right, yes.
That's
I'm only
right.
the prospective candidate,
Oh.
but it may
I
be
wish you well, and
Thank you very much.
we need fresh blood like yours and unbiased minds like yours, as I have judged myself.
Well, it's very useful
God
to
bless you.
come and discuss matters with you. Thank you.
Allah helps you and come and to rise to a position where you could really lead the people, not to be led by people.
Yeah.
This is again a grave problem which we are suffering from.
Yes, but the danger of
Politics
populism.
is now being subjugated to the will of people as such, not to the interest of people. So what is lacking in democracy is for the people. By the people is all right.
Yes.
But it is the for the people which is being corroded. And our politicians are very much responsible for this, for their selfish interest in rising to power, even at the cost of the interest of the people in general. So I hope you will bring new blood and healthy trends into politics.
Well, thank you.
Inshallah.
Very kind.
Okay. Thank you. Take it easy.
MTA International, reaching the corners of the earth.